Welcome to another production of Source Selection Soundbites. These productions foster learning, insight, and the ability to perform. Today's topic is the non-manufacturer rule. Today we will discuss the non-manufacturer rule basics, the applicability of the non-manufacturer rule, and then we will discuss non-manufacturer rule constraints. In the limitation on subcontracting soundbites, we discussed that when selling services and supplies, a vendor cannot subcontract more than 50% of the contract dollars to subcontractors when the acquisition is set aside for small businesses. The limitation is in place because the government has an expectation that the small business will perform a certain portion of the work with its own employees. The non-manufacturer rule is a bit of an exception from the general rule as it pertains to supplies. It allows vendors to resell products they did not grow or produce. The resellers did not grow or produce the product, so it is clear that 50% or more of the revenue will not ultimately go to the company reselling the product. The NAICS codes that are associated with a non-manufacturer rule are generally those in sections 31 through 33. The size standards related to these NAICS code for the purposes of the distributors is 500 employees. Those who fit the size standard are dealing with some kind of product or supply. On the other hand, the IT value-added reseller is a NAICS code that allows vendors to provide a total solution to information technology acquisitions by providing multi-vendor hardware and software, along with significant value-added services. Significant value-added services consist of, but are not limited to, configuration consulting and design, systems integration, installation of multi-vendor computer equipment, customization of hardware or software, training, product technical support, maintenance, and end-user support. For purposes of government procurement, an information technology procurement classified under this exception and 150 employee size standard must consist of at least 15% and not more than 50% of value-added services, as measured by the total contract price. If the contract consists of less than 15% of value-added services, then it must be classified under a manufacturing NAICS code. If the contract consists of more than 50% of value-added services, then it must be classified under the NAICS code that best describes the predominant service of the procurement. The non-manufacturer rule applies at different thresholds. If the agency does a general small business set-aside, the non-manufacturer rule does not apply until the acquisition value exceeds the simplified acquisition threshold. However, in other situations, it's applicable when $1 is spent, including when the hub zone price evaluation preference is used, or when the acquisition is set aside to socio-economic classes of contractors like 8A, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, woman-owned small business, and hub zone small businesses. In order to qualify as a non-manufacturer that can distribute products, there are certain caveats. The first is that the business size cannot exceed 500 employees. The second thing is the offeror must be primarily engaged in the retail or wholesale trade and normally sell the type of item supplied. Third, the offeror must take ownership or possession of the item being supplied with its own personnel, equipment, or facilities in a manner consistent with industry practice. Lastly, the reseller must sell an item manufactured or produced by a small business in the United States. This constraint even applies to kit assemblers. That is, at least half of the items, measured by total value, in the assembly kit must be made by a domestic small business. In order to avoid providing a small business product, a waiver must be obtained. As mentioned in the last slide, if the CO wants to set the acquisition aside, the non-manufacturers must provide the product of a small business unless the CO requests and obtains an individual waiver from the Small Business Administration. The CO's request must contain 1. A definitive statement identifying the specific product for which the waiver is requested. 2. An explanation addressing why the specific item is required. 3. The solicitation number, NAICS code, estimated dollar value of the procurement, and a brief statement of procurement history. 4. A summary of market research detailing the efforts to locate a small business manufacturer, and 5. A copy of the statement of work if the contract is expected to exceed $500,000. The waiver must be used within 1 year of being granted by the SBA. If the CO does not want to obtain a waiver, The CO may simply issue the procurement as an unrestricted acquisition. Before applying for an individual waiver, the CO should check the SBA class waiver list. The SBA may issue a class waiver when no small business manufacturer has submitted, performed, or been awarded an offer on a solicitation for a class of products within the previous 2 years. Anyone can request a class waiver. Class waivers remain in place until SBA determines small business manufacturers or processors have become available to participate in the federal market or receives evidence that a small business manufacturer exists in the federal market for a waived class of products. Let's wrap this up. In this episode of Source Selection Soundbites, we discussed the basics of the non-manufacturer rule. Second, the applicability of the non-manufacturer rule. And third, the constraints of the non-manufacturer rule. Thank you for watching another episode of Source Selection Soundbites. For additional information, check out some of the other videos in this series, other Productivity Partners materials, or our Source Selection Answer app that is available on the Google Play Store and Apple Store. In any event, thanks for watching, and see you next time.